Welcome, everybody. My name is Tommy Source. I'm Assistant Director of the Purdue Institute of Inflammation, Immunology and Infectious Disease. And today I am honored to welcome Arvind Kumar, Vice President for Research at BiomEdit. Welcome, Arvind. Thank you for being part of our Pathfinder program today.
Thank you. It's an absolute pleasure to be on this program today. Thank you for the invite.
Absolutely. I am so excited to talk to you today. I know a little bit, but very little about this new and exciting company called BiomEdit that you are Vice President for Research and that you are essentially getting going. And I am so interested to hear a little bit the story of how you went from Elanco to start BiomEdit. But perhaps we can get started with a little bit further back. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and how it is that you ended up coming to work here in Indiana?
All right. Thank you. No, absolute pleasure. I can go back in time and talk about in terms of how I started and what brought me here. So I got trained as a veterinarian back home in India and spent a good early 5 years in hardcore veterinary clinical practice. And working closer to the animals, that got my interest into infectious diseases. And I started my career in research with training in Masters in Immunology from Imperial College London and a PhD in veterinary microbiology from University of Edinburgh. And I continued to lead my academic research career for 10 years. And I had my research group based with a focus on infectious diseases and primarily looking at the foodborne pathogens. And that was the program I led as faculty in the vet school, Royal Duke School of Veterinary Studies. And I had my research group based in the Roslin Institute.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then it was way back in 2012 when I had one of those random phone calls from one of the headhunters, recruiters in Germany. And they have a way to sell, and they sold me. And yeah, I ended up on the other side, what used to be the dark side. And that was a position to lead R&D for Lohmann Animal Health. That was a family-owned business based in Germany. And I was based for 4 years in Hanover. And that was the time when Elanco, still as a part of Lilly, was looking to expand their business into vaccines, and they acquired Lohmann Animal Health. And as a part of that acquisition, I became a part of Elanco, Happy Elanco family. And it was in 2016 when they were building their global R&D facilities here in US. They sponsored and they brought me here as one of the key lead members to help in vaccine research. And that's a little story how I ended up here.
Wow. What a story. That is so interesting. I have to ask you, just out of curiosity, because you've experienced science in Europe, you've experienced science in India, you've experienced science in North America. Is it very different cultural-wise, or because it's science, it's universal and everybody essentially sticks with the same norms, I guess?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, I think. If I look back in terms of the time spent in academic early career, I was as a faculty in vet school in India, and then in Scotland, in Edinburgh, and now here more or less in industry setting. But still, I think it's the motivation and drive is very similar. And of course, depends on sometimes, as you know it very well, academic, leading research in academic setting, you got to be competitive in grants. And so that really is very similar. There is perhaps not any much of a difference. And sometimes what I have seen is in different geographical locations, depends on what is being promoted and what's being favored at the time. So different agencies could sponsor different areas of research. But other than then, the drill is very similar. That's my personal sense. Yeah.
That's so interesting, that perspective. And because you would think different areas, you do have nuances in the culture that do come into the workplace. And that must have been it must have been a bit of a different scenario to work, well, definitely from Scotland to Germany, and then Germany to Indiana. That transition. Tell us a little bit about what that was like. It must have been so. So you said Scotland was what year, and then you went to Germany, and then in 2016 they called you. What was the time like in from Scotland to Germany, from Edinburgh to Germany?
All right. So in Edinburgh, I was from 2002 to 2012, 10 years.
Okay.
And then from 2012 to 2016, that's when I was in Germany.
Okay.
And from 2016, now 2022, that's where I am in US. So that's kind of time frame.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Fantastic. And I won't ask you if you enjoyed haggis for 10 years while you were living in Edinburgh. But that's another story.
Yeah.
But tell me, Arvind, so you get called by the headhunter, and you're doing your thing in immunology, infectious diseases, and like, what was that like? I mean, that must have been pretty exciting to get a phone call like that.
Yeah. No, in fact, it was exciting, but also I can try to capture my emotions, what I felt at the time. And for all intent and purposes, Edinburgh was my home. I got trained as a graduate student and went on to be a part of faculty coming from India. To me, that was a dream. And I couldn't ask for more. I was sharing the room and offices with people who were my mentors, who I could think of as the best leaders in science. And then I ended up as a part of a faculty with them. So to me, I couldn't ask for more, in all honesty. And so when that phone call came in, I asked myself that very raw question: is it something I do not like about this job? So the answer was, yes, I'm in love with it. There was nothing more I could dream of. And then the second was, is it something I do not like with the people with whom I'm working today? So again, the question was, no, I was completely in love with the people, known them as a graduate student. And so again, and then last one was, is it something I don't like about this place? So Edinburgh, who have been there, is one of the loveliest cities. So it was a flat. I liked my profession. I liked the people I was working. I was in love with the place. So I thought there's nothing to lose about. Hey, I, as a clinician, was always keen to see my science getting translated into a solution. And I knew it. It's the industry that has the muscle power and can give you that space. And in my academic research, I was closely working with industry. So I thought, hey, this is a chance for me. With a very carefree, open mind, I said, I'll go and put my hat in the ring and let's see how far I reach, how far I go. So it was quite a kind of a, I see it as a extended exercise. First interview was in Munich. They visited Edinburgh. They wanted to see my setup, and then they invited me to their company headquarters in Cuxhaven. And I can see it typically, Thomas, this is a family-owned business, a global business. And the situation is, I am a non-German. I don't speak German. And they had a full German team, and trying to bring somebody, this was not, and so they wanted to completely scrutinize and be very comfortable who they are bringing in. So they took quite a bit of time. So I went on through different steps. And then it came to a point that I had to take a call decision when they offered either this or that. We are going to play that hide and seek game anymore. Okay. And then I spoke to my friends who were in industry and were also had a visibility of life in academia, and they knew me very well. And they said, Arvind, I know academia offers you very secure and very comfortable career. You can already see what those 10 years or 15 years are going to look like for you. But if you were ever interested to go into industry, this is one of the best options you're getting. Yes. And they were recruiting me to head their research, basically. And it was a very well thought out plan, what they wanted to do. So I basically almost took a kind of a little blind decision in hindsight. When I look at it, was too big a risk going into a country I don't speak of a language and leaving behind a very safe and secure job of an academia. And things were going really well. Publications, grants, they were coming in. I had a number of postdocs and students. So it was a very functional and productive career that I was leading. So there was quite a bit at stake. But then I asked myself, it's one time, one life, and I don't want to go with the regret. And I thought, nothing to lose, let's go there. Let's go there. Let's go there. So that's how it started. And when it was funny enough, when I was being quizzed or being interviewed in Cuxhaven, VP R&D, she asked me, Arvind, what do you like about Germany? And I said, I like the German beers. And they said, that's a good start. There's nothing to go wrong beyond that. This is how it all started for me. I
think I would have answered the exact same way as you did. But that's really, really interesting. You know, Arvind, so it seemed like you were really focused on an academic career and you were building it, you were setting it up. And then all of a sudden, this surprise comes. And, you know, for this audience, it's important to understand that opportunity came and it was up to you whether you would take it or not. And it was a tough decision because you had a good world already made up for yourself. And now you had to decide whether I want to go take a leap of faith and start almost brand new, right? So, okay, I have to ask you, are there elements of your academic career that you miss now, that you wish you could still have some of that? Or are there, you know, things that you used to do that you don't get to do anymore that you do miss?
Yeah, no, that's a very fine and very right question. I can reflect on where are the trade-offs in my own mind. I think in academic research, one thing I felt, because you can go deep and deep, and because you can go with the flow, basically. You have a hypothesis, and very often what you hypothesis you have, things don't work out that way. You are reflecting and you're trying to basically recreate something or change a course of biology, which has over millions of years have settled in one way. So, but what I saw in academia, you have an hypothesis, you do an experiment, and you see something and you can follow it, basically. And that could be completely, totally different than what you wanted to do. Basically, you can go with the flow and take every result as a lead and build yourself that way. And now that isn't a luxury anymore where I sit today. And of course, we are creating, translating science into solutions, and the products we are creating are very much rooted in strong science. But there is an element of discipline in here. That means the science is a means to an end and not an end in itself.
Got it. Got it. That's very great to put it that way. So you use it as a tool, more so than you perfect it. You're not perfecting the science. You're using it as a tool to make products that impact people.
Right, very true. And sometimes in all transparency and sincerity, as we work in industry, we are using science as a tool, and sometimes things are not fully perfected. But if it gives me a lead and fair understanding to take that result to a next level, I will move on.
Mhm.
I won't go in a little downward spiral, asking and trying to sharpen my question and go deep and deep, but rather take a lead and work that way to move forward.
Yeah. And Arvind, I've worked with companies, I've worked with academics together with companies, and there's this question that is always very different between the academic mindset and the industry mindset, the company mindset. And the question is, when is it good enough? Because for me, in the academic mindset, many times it's never good enough. We got to keep digging, digging, digging until we know the entire universe of what we're looking at, versus industry will say, no, this is good enough for us to move to the next step, which is what I'm interpreting as what you're saying to me, that we need to stop at some point in time rather than drilling into these deeper chasms, deeper holes. How do you decide it's good enough? Let's move on.
Yeah, I think that's a very much kind of a judgment-based question to question. And there are some questions which are very logical and legitimate in industry setting also. We may not answer them right then and there, but keep it as a learning to follow if we need to, if we don't need that particular result, say, going forward. Making it as an example, for instance, if we are creating a thermostable strain, I'm using it as a dummy example.
Yes.
And we are using science to create that thermostable strain. And we are able to hit what is needed for us to create a product. If we are looking for that thermostable strain to survive in an X temperature, say 60 to 65 as an example.
Yes.
And once we hit that point, we will perhaps draw a line and move on.
Right.
And if it was an academic setting, I may do much more to take it further, see how far I can. I may, to an extent, don't want to come across as flippant. There could be an element of an indulgence. But here in industry setting, this is what we set out, and that's the spec we are looking. That's what is needed for it to be a product. We hit that, and then we move on to the next.
And Arvind, so because I would think in academic circles, a question like that is, okay, so I hit thermostability at the temperature that I wanted. Now I got to go drill down and do the lipidomics, the metabolomics, the proteomics, the genomics of this particular organism to understand what it looked like before and now that it's more thermostable. And I'm going to go dig deep, deep into all of that, versus you only care, did we reach thermostability? And yeah, it looks like everything else is somewhat normal. Let's just keep on moving from there. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yep. We'll do perhaps a one click, and we may compare what that derivative and parent looks like.
Yeah.
But we won't mostly go to work it out, which heat shock protein, and can we make a mutant now, and let's see. So that is something, that's where I see in academic setting, perhaps I'll do those things. Here, having said that, we definitely will do so as to create an IP that gives us a basic understanding, comparative.
Yes, but not necessarily to understand the biology of why that particular organism can tolerate the 65 degrees and the other one cannot. right? What is the actual biology that gave rise to those, as you said, heat shock proteins and whatever other ways that it adjusted metabolically to deal with the higher temperatures and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah, that's true. And
Yeah.
what we do is, if I may share with you, when
Yes.
there is a question like this, which is a very right question, and we should know it, what we do is we partner with experts sitting in those academic labs where they have the bandwidth and the expertise and the toolkit to go to that
Yes.
level. And
Yes.
within our framework, we are constrained. We as much would like to have all that depth of expertise. We don't. So we will partner, and that's how we will leverage those external capabilities.
Well, and again, in full transparency, those types of partnerships are what got us to meet you and be able to work with wonderful people in your team at Elanco. And that has been so exciting and so great, I think, for both Elanco and for Purdue. But it seems to me like Elanco grew into or bubbled out into this BiomEdit because of maybe the work that you and your team was doing. Tell us a little bit about that. I am so curious to understand just a little bit of the dynamics on the business side, but definitely, the science that gives rise to a new venture, a new company. Maybe the audience would be interested in how that evolution occurred.
Excellent. I think that's yeah, thank you. That gives me a segue in terms of talking about how we ended up where we are today. As
Yeah.
a little background, at Elanco, if we know, Elanco has been leading business around antibiotic growth promoters historically, big time. And that was a big part of Elanco's business. And it became very obvious that there is a much more public sensitivity and scrutiny around use of antibiotics because of the antibiotic resistance, because of all those reasons. And so Elanco has been very much cognizant of the fact that they got to have other ways to address that space. And this is not something you can continue for very long. So there are two ways how you can go about. One, you go into vaccines, you can create a situation, you can prevent certain diseases by using vaccines as a way to prevent. And second is going ahead with nutritional health-based products where you can take care of the nutrition, and that way you can improve the health and you can prevent certain diseases. And Elanco was very keen to build, or rather, it's a business. You want to be fast and you want to be quick. And Elanco has been very actively acquiring companies that bring the substrate and the pipeline, the talent, so as to move forward in those areas. And historically, when it was vaccines, they brought Roman Animal Health, they brought Novartis Animal Health. So that has been the story in making here. And for the nutritional health-based products, they were looking around. They looked and they brought, for instance, Camzin is in the company, and they brought it in. But what it became very obvious and clear, then Aaron Schacht, who was then the executive vice president at Elanco, they looked around that, hey, there is not much out there that Elanco can acquire. And what out is there, some of those products are very anecdotal in a sense. They are being used as nutritional health products, but they are not having such a deep and strong science because the time they were created, those kind of tools were not available. So there was kind of a little gap in there. And it became obvious that if Elanco wants to play in that space and lead that space, they need to build their own internal capabilities. And that was something as one of the key members was brought into, and had another friend of mine, Troy. So we both were assigned that as an ask. And it was very natural because being a microbiologist, I was already leading and developing certain technologies at Elanco, which were being developed to deliver vaccines, but also could very well be positioned to deliver any other and play in the nutritional health space.
I see.
So we were given all the support in bringing in the talent and build the toolkit and create that framework at Elanco. So this was all going very well. Everything was in place. And as is the case in a bigger organizations like Elanco, where there are so many other business units that are equally competitive and perhaps also had a way to make quick money for Elanco. And so it became very obvious after recent acquisitions Elanco made, Bayer Animal Health and Kindred Bio. It became obvious that pet health is an area where Elanco wants to focus and prioritize for the right reasons.
Sure.
But given the value of this platform, how it can play in future products, Elanco still wanted to find a way how to create a value in this space. And it became a possibility that, hey, can you be a little clever about it? That can you create a home for this platform and this business enterprise outside of Elanco as a spin-off? So Elanco was very generous in creating that framework where both the platform, the pipeline, the patents, and the people, they all were packaged and were given this new home as a BiomEdit.
Wow.
Yeah. And so it was a very, I'll call it as a seamless to an extent that there wasn't much of a disruption. It was not typically a new startup where everything has got to start from a scratch. It was a very functional, well-oiled machinery that was almost translocated into this new home. And at BiomEdit, now our focus is to basically use the microbiome-focused science to develop next year products targeting microbiome as a way either to target it, to influence both health and the nutritional side of the case. Yeah.
That is so exciting. I don't really know of too many other microbiome focused companies out there, and it's exciting to see this here in Indiana.
It's true, but there are companies, but in Indiana, I think this is the one. And when we were going for raising money, if you think of microbiome, there are a number of publications you can almost see, almost it's bursting out, and everything boils down and tracks back. So it almost begins to look like a little bit of a, I don't want to call it as a black magic, but begins to look like a very nebulous space.
Sure.
So as much as it is very attractive, it is also challenging. How do you translate that science into a solution and create a product that has got a commercial value?
Yeah.
So here at BiomEdit, we have a very innovative and unique discovery platform that is able to give us different franchise of product lines that are all focused on microbiome, as we see it as another extension of the body. It's another organ. And you know, brain, gut-brain axis, gut-lung axis. So if you have a basic understanding how those things are interacting in a very clever way, one can basically impact health and disease using microbiome as the space. That's what we're trying. Yeah.
Phenomenal, Arvind. And so tell us a little bit about, it seems to me, so microbiome, the study of microbial populations, the understanding how they colonize our bodies, the bodies of an animal, the different guts systems of an animal. Is there a focus for the company in terms of, I know Elanco very much on the pet population and also on the agricultural animal population. Is BiomEdit also focused on those two areas, or is there also a human microbiome piece to BiomEdit?
Oh, no, that's a very fine question, Tommy. Right now, we are focused on, of course, livestock species. And when I say livestock species, it includes all the farm animals and fish.
Okay.
And then also we have a big time focus on the pet health, dog and cats.
Okay.
And where we play today, and knowing the similarities and how the microbiome science for humans and animals, there is a very easy crossover, at least for some of those metabolic diseases. So we are very keen to find a way to translate some of those learnings from an animal health space into human health space. And and there is an advantage, if I may go a step further in sharing the rationale. When we think of a microbiome space in livestock species, it's very controlled and contained. If we look at even poultry as an example, even the genetics are very controlled, and the farm practices are very controlled, diet is controlled, genotype of the birds are controlled. So if you want to basically see a effect of a microbiome shift, or we impact microbiome to improve the health and performance, this gives us a very controlled natural setup. And the learnings from such controlled systems are easy to scale up or translate into a human space, because otherwise that's very, very diverse, given the nature of what goes in that space. So the learnings, and it's quite possible that it may be a smarter or a quicker way to take some of those learnings and expand into a human health space, given how quickly we can de-risk and understand with that controlled and conservative biological systems.
Yeah, but it seems to me, so there is, and you know what's exciting in this field is that there continues to be this growth of understanding and multidisciplinary collaborations coming together. I know there is bioinformatics. I know there is a lot of computational science that goes along with all of this. Tell us a little bit about, my gosh, it must be so exciting to be in this world where machine learning and algorithms are helping us make the decisions that we're making. That must be awesome to be part of that growth there. To tell us a little bit about the different areas coming together in this company.
You're spot on, because this is a science, as you rightly pointed it out. It's not a linear, it's very multidimensional. And so data these days is easy and cheap to acquire. Yeah. But where the trick is, what you make of that data. So here, the way we are generating the data, that includes all the omics we can think of. So we are creating a functional microbial reference library in health and disease. And what happens when we treat? Not only limited to simply the microbes, but also looking at impact on the host. So you are spot on. So it really becomes a very complex, multidimensional data sets, which are very dense and deep. Yeah. And the only way for us to make sense of that data is to have AI-based and high-end computing systems in place where we look at that as an integrated and not, otherwise it's almost becomes very subjective if you only look at such a data in a one linear dimension. Yeah. So we have all that, and that's the strength here, as much as we are acquiring those data and we are using system biology approaches and using bioinformatics approach. And Jacob is online. He's core and central in helping us. How can we negotiate such a multidimensional deep data and ask certain questions in a way that we can take the subjectivity out?
Yeah, yeah. It's so important to have statisticians, computational scientists that can help us. And, one question that I have, Arvind, is how do we, and I've had this question to other scientists on the program too, is how do we ensure that the language that we're speaking is communicated properly, and that the statistician and computational scientist can communicate back to us the importance of what they're seeing, and us interpret it into biological terms or biological phenomena that we're trying to understand, and then relate that back to them, because this seems to be the balance of how we really are going to progress in this area.
Spot. And there's always that danger, each one working in silo and looking it totally from a different optics, and there's always a danger. So here is what we try to do. Basically, we sit as a team, and these are very sometimes abstract and spread out domains. Biostatistician, very much cultured, having looking at data with very different eyes, and then a clinician, and then a researcher. Each one has very different optics. So the way we try to narrow down those gaps, that we try to see what that biology is about and have a reference and context, and then go back and look at that data and try to digest and try to bring all that diverse data and basically use some ways where we are not subjective in how we look at it, and then have multiple data points across not only one study, but multiple studies to figure out the trends and patterns.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And it definitely needs all those different expertise to be looking at and talking, and in a way that makes a sense.
I love that. I love that. And I think that's great recommendation, even for academic scientists, to think of it. If you don't have a biostatistician on your team, if you don't have somebody that can help you make sense, even before you start the experiment, that can help you design it, it's always great to have these different disciplines that come together, especially nowadays, because we, and I'll say something. I read a statistic that is very telling of how things are going. Arvind, if you remember how much data you produced for your PhD thesis, I bet you might have been like megabytes of data. When I completed my thesis, I'm sure I was in the gigabytes of data. And now, like, you are into the, more than terabytes. Like terabyte is nothing for somebody who has produced a thesis in today's biological, realm. Imagine the amount of bioinformatics that you guys do, and how that has changed in the past 6-7 years, and how PhD thesis continue to grow in this area. So the more training we have, or at least the more people that we can help to put together that can help us with this, is absolutely necessary. It's such a telling piece of what's happening.
Yeah. And here we are very intentional about it, even how we generate the data. For instance, if you are planning a clinical study, just to share as an example, we have a biostatistician and we have who's going to look at and use that data from an omics perspective. And we ask those questions upfront. What will be the minimum number or the sampling should be done, so that it's not something we got to go back and retrospectively try to fit. We are intentional about it, that we capture the right data at the right time and do right things in a way so that we don't have to feel sorry.
And waste our time or waste money. I agree. I agree. That's a really great recommendation too. Arvind, you know, you've had this opportunity to grow in your career. And I congratulate you on such a great and successful career. You seem to really continue to grow, and you have to share with us, what are some of your elements of success? What do you think made you a successful scientist, all the way, from your PhD to postdoc and faculty position and then industry? What are the elements that have brought you success?
All right. No, that's yeah. Let me. I'll put my heart on my sleeves and just talk it through in terms of how it has been for me. I think one thing, if I had got to look back my years as a PhD student, I was curious. And having my roots as a clinician, I was always very keen to see how what I see can be translated. And that was always the back of my mind, even when I wasn't the one who would actually translate into that actual solution, but that was always at the back of my mind. So being very curious and always thinking how it can be translated into a solution, that always kept me going from academia, it pulled me into industry. That's what I wanted to do. And one thing, what has been, I think, my innate, I don't want to call it as a strength, but my way of working, I always believe that there's always somebody better than me who can do faster than me. So I have never been making as an effort for me to be the final one to do it all. I would always look for people who can do it better and do it in a smarter than me, and find a way to get them interested and excited about what I am looking, the way I'm looking at it. And very quickly, I would bring them on board and create a possibility for them where they feel the owners and drivers of that piece. And then I reduce myself, after having played that role in a sporting way, I reduce myself to almost sometimes in background. And that's the kind of space, the way I have always been working. And this has always been my anthem, that, hey, only if I can get others to give their best, then the best will come out. And even now, as I have graduated in my roles over these years from one space to another, my deep understanding as it is today, if I have to share with you, to begin with, it was more about my IQ in terms of my own having expertise in that domain area. So I could do what I could do. But as I have graduated over these years with different responsibilities in the organization, it's more about what I call it as an emotional quotient. Now, this is all about working with people who are smarter than me, who are having more of energy, more of basically, they're better than me at everything. How I can create a possibility for them so that they can give their best. So in my current role, my effort is I go out and look to recruit the best. No compromise when it comes to getting the merit. So I go out, look for the best, and then my role is to give them the best when they come and join the organization, so that they can give their best for the best of organization. I call it as a B4. Get the best, give your best, so that they can give their best for the best of the organization.
Right.
And that has been, and another learning what I have, that when I have a team around, how quickly I can move the ball so that it doesn't stay too long with one more than it has to be. and let people connect and communicate. And once that flywheel moves where people are talking, they're invested, they see the sense in it, things go really, really fast. That is my own personal journey in terms of how I have or I am doing my job.
Yeah, no, and it sounds like you are now in this element of people, managing people and understanding how the teams come together and how they work best together, proper communication. Are there we have lab meetings in academia. Are there routine meetings that you guys have, not only for science but also to come together? Does that happen in the company where people are just hanging out on a social type of perspective and they can just relax, or is it only in a work like perspective that people are meeting and getting together?
Yeah, so there are different, I will call it as different ways in how people are interacting. One is very formal. When it's a project specific meeting, it's very much laid out. Agenda is very clear. We are trying to basically closely watch out how things are progressing. All the key members are there. They're trying to give their best so as to move the things forward. And so they are very disciplined, very much regulated in what we want to achieve out of those meetings. And then there is another forum, which is more about in terms of thinking about the science, what we can do. For instance, as an example, I have in my own team created a possibility where a team, they're still struggling, but I have asked them, they put 3 hours of focus time where you can control the traffic, no more email, just concentrate on what next or the science you're doing. Because in our space, it's important for us to have a science and secure science. I call it as having an IP. And be always on the front in terms of leading the science in an area that you want to build your products in. I don't want us to be playing a second fiddle. We want to be exposed to the bleeding end of science. So the team has to find a way where they can cut down that background noise that comes in the form of messages, emails, and all that goes on to run the day, but find your controlled space. And doesn't matter, you can be at home somewhere, but give 3 hours in 1 week, very disciplined, because that's where I want your best to create those next year ideas, next year products. So that's a one space where it's very control contained, a personal time for the scientists. And then there is where there are normal, we get people to present this science, experts in field from outside, and internally team is having those brainstorm sessions. When we decide that that's an area we want to go and work in, so the team, and that team doesn't need to be just my team because we are so small a footprint, we want to make most of it. So this is an invite for people across the organization, and that would include even our CEO. Aaron himself is so passionate about science, and we pull him in as well into those very raw, and he loves that. And it's almost kind of a whiteboard exercise for us.
Yeah.
So we try to create different framework, and I have to admit, I would love to be in a setting where everybody is under one roof. Much of sometimes their spark comes in those informal interactions. You call them coffee chats or bumping some. Yeah, so given the nature and space where we are today, that's not a luxury, but still we are working as hard as we can to create those possibilities online and how people will interact and exchange science. So different things, try to keep it as exciting as possible and also as controlled as possible.
And Arvind, just to clarify for the people that are listening, BiomEdit is in Fishers, Indiana, but also has some space in Greenfield with Elanco still. And so you kind of are saying that this distributed model, not everybody under the same room or the same roof is what you're talking about, right?
That's true. That's true.
Okay.
So right now, in fact, where I'm sitting in Elanco labs or Elanco premises.
Okay.
So Yeah, so we have taken a portion of those labs on lease. So
Okay.
that means there was no disruption for us. That was big time. I'll call it as very, very caring of Elanco to create that
Yeah.
possibility for us. You know it. Once you move, it takes a minimum
Sure.
7 to 8 months even to get very basic machines working. And here we have a
Yeah.
deep end, very high end machines, very integrated machines that would have taken us totally, thrown us. So yep.
Yeah.
Today, as a so the lab-based lead staff continues to operate from Elanco premises in Greenfield, and we have BiomEdit has its own headquarter offices in Fishers. That's only about 25 to 30 minutes drive between these two locations.
Okay. Okay. Also, it's not terrible. It's not
It's
too
not
far.
terrible. It's not terrible, and there's a crisscross flow. People in and out, so that we continue to find a way to interact. Yeah, that's how it is.
And the plan, if you're able to share with us, Arvind, is the plan then to slowly transition everything to Fishers and be situated there uh, for within the headquarters?
Yeah. So right now, where we are, this is very much an office specific setup.
Got it.
For the labs, we'll have to look for a possibility where we can do the BSL2 lab work. So that
Sure.
will be a different call. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, definitely that's on the cards for us. And
Yes.
Sooner or later, we are going to basically grow out of in terms of a need and requirement where we were based today. And we'll be looking for options going forward.
It's incredible, the expansion and the growth of Fishers. It is so exciting to see it. I've driven past it and I'm seeing it. It's so exciting. It really is incredible.
Yeah, no,
Uh,
it has changed a lot, and there is a very concerted effort in building up and creating those possibilities for young companies, the incubators. There's already a list labs that's basically they're broken the ground. So there is
yeah,
a scenario building it up where there will be a dedicated layout in Fishers, and there's a drive to bring the young companies and start. So a lot is happening there. You're right. Yeah, things are changing very quickly here.
absolutely. It's just so exciting to see. And I think it's good opportunity for people at our academic institutions to pay attention to some of that growth and find some opportunities. Tell me something, Arvind. Are you at all yet in growth mode, or are your team is at the size that it needs to be now, and you guys are making slow progress to grow?
No, we are in a growth mode. We are in a
You
growth
are.
mode. And just to give a reference, in last 2 months, we're going to have 7 hires.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
That's a
we are,
big growth.
it's a big growth. It's a big growth. And
Yes.
those are the functions. Some of those are functions that we were getting supported as a part of Elanco. And some of those functions are around what we see as gaps where we want to be tomorrow. So this is being very intentional effort. And we believe that anemic input gives you anemic growth.
Mhm.
So we want to bring it, of course, right people for the right reasons. And
Yes.
so we are not shy of putting where resources are needed, they are needed. And Aaron is fully on board. We are, so that's the, so it's very much in a growing phase.
Are you able to share a few of the areas that you guys are looking to fulfill, or are there plans, so that the audience can kind of see what are some of the scientific areas or areas for jobs that you guys are looking for?
Very good. So there are kind of 3 areas which are core, what I call it as key pillars in terms of the kind of product franchise that we are pushing forward. One is around the native strains. So as we are building up a library, what we call it as microbial reference libraries, that is a substrate that we are using, and the product lines are like native strains.
Okay.
So in that space, we are still looking for a hands-on person who can help us with high throughput isolation, screening, and characterization, and be apt with the different omics that are used in creating those microbial reference libraries.
Right.
And then the second tier is where it is about protein engineering.
Okay.
Where some of those microbial bioactives that stand alone can be a drug or can be a product, and what we can do to create a product line out there. The nature work is you have an enzyme, you want to make it as a protease resistant, you want to make it as a thermostable. So that's another spine of work, which is more around, you can imagine, protein engineering and downstream processing that goes on. And the third tier is where we are using microbes as delivery systems.
Okay.
So yeah, the nature work is we are isolating and characterizing to start with niche specific probiotic strains, and we are engineering them as chassis to deliver targeted biotherapeutics. These could be different enzymes, these could be different anti-infectives or immune modulatory molecules.
Okay.
So that's the third tier. So you can imagine the kind of tool and talent that we need across all those areas of work. We are pretty much, in a way, have brought in for the first phase of work that we need in these areas, other than where we are looking for someone to help us with high throughput isolation screening. That space is still open-ended.
Yeah. My gosh, it seems like lots of great opportunities. I really hope people are listening to what you're saying. And how do they find out how to go and for these opportunities? How do we learn more? Do we go to your website? Should we look at LinkedIn? Where do we direct people?
Right now, LinkedIn is the best, what we have experienced, and that's the portal that we're using. BiomEdit, the website is still in making. It should hopefully be available, and it's a matter of a few weeks, I think so. But the LinkedIn is the best portal where we are advertising or offering those options for people. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. Dr. Arvind Kumar, Vice President for Research at BiomEdit in beautiful Fishers, Indiana, and a little bit in Greenfield, Indiana as well. It is such a pleasure to talk to you always, and to hear some of your adventures in your career, and to learn about, what has been the elements of your success. Congratulations. And we are all so excited for BiomEdit and to see it grow and succeed. So thank you again for being our Pathfinder today and helping us see a little bit of light from your side.
No, thank you very much. It was a great opportunity for me to talk, and it was a very impromptu conversation. Thank you for creating that hospitable setting for me. It's my first ever formal conversation. And thank you, made it really sound very easy. And it was really easy to talk, and it was almost a coffee chat with a friend. That's how I felt like. And yeah, thank you for giving that opportunity to me and to the BiomEdit. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for the kind feedback. It felt like a great conversation with a good friend to me as well. So I take that as a great compliment. Thank you, Arvind. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Stay tuned for another great Pathfinder interview, and we'll catch you at the next one. Thanks again, Arvind.
Thank you. Have a nice evening. Thank you.
Thanks, you too. Bye-bye.